Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In order to develop properly this Congress, we ask you politely to put your cell phones down, please. First of all, we want to inform that in case of any event or emergency, we are in security evacuation zone. However, the emergency areas are identified in this building. They are next to this room and they have exit signs. If there is an emergency, we will help you and we will appreciate that you keep calm and follow the instructions for evacuation. It is a pleasure for our institution to have you in this standardization ISO-IEC GTC 1SC37 Biometric Congress, sponsored by the Chilean National Institute of Normalization. This Congress is going to hold from January the 14th to the 22nd, 2019 for the university. We are going to work in parallel with the BIoseg Congress Biometrical International and Security organized by Universidad Tecnológica de Chile, Inacap. We want to welcome the regional authorities, speakers, academic authorities to our BIoseg Congress, and special welcome to Inacap authorities, Mr. Sebastián Cabello Cepeda, Vice Chancellor, Don Ángel Bacluf, Director de Vinculación con el Medio, and academic authorities, expositors, and visitors all. First of all, and continue with this Congress, we want to invite to the stage Mr. Juan Tapia Farias, PhD, IT Electricity and Electronic Chief, who will say some words, please.
Hello everyone. It's a real pleasure to me and for us, for our university, to host the first ISO GTC CS37 Biometrics Committee. For sure, this was a long journey for us. Finally, you are arrived to Chile. Together with the ISO Biometrics Committee, a biometric and security seminar will be held here by BIoseg 2019. Both activities are sponsored by the following companies here, and further thanks to the INN, the mirror ISO in Chile, Inacap, the HubTarapacá, and TOC Biometrics. The idea is to deliver some logistic information to you, but please let me know to explain to my colleagues in Spanish what is the relevance about the ISO committee. El Comité Internacional ISO es un comité de estandarización y al igual como se aplica en Chile en diferentes organismos para normar procedimientos, existe su símil en biometría. Ese símil en biometría es el comité SC37. ¿Y de qué se encarga? Es un organismo técnico que se encarga de estandarizar todos aquellos equipos, pruebas, con la finalidad de que aquellos equipos que se desarrollen, por ejemplo un teléfono que tiene un detector de huella, tiene que estar sometido a una estandarización para que todos los fabricantes puedan hacerlo igual. Un teléfono que tiene una cámara, alguien tiene que normar la calidad de la imagen, el tamaño, todo lo que tiene respecto a eso. De esa forma se crean estándares y los fabricantes pueden diseñar su equipo de acuerdo a estos fabricantes. De ahí la relevancia de este comité. Es relevante debido a que a nivel mundial ellos fijan los estándares. ¿Ya? Esta conferencia es la primera vez que se realiza en Chile y espero que no sea la última. ¿Ya? Y es muy relevante, como ustedes pueden ver aquí, este comité ha dado lugar a 121 normas ISO. ¿Ya? Actualmente tiene 27 países participantes, donde lo más relevante de todo esto y que... Murphy. Wow, now it's okay. esta foto muestra mucho de lo relevante que es este comité. Ustedes pueden ver en diferentes colores los países participantes. Existen países participantes que son miembros y otros que son observadores. Como pueden ver, en Sudamérica no tenemos nada, ¿ya? De ahí la relevancia que este comité visite Chile, que pueda crear nuevos caminos, que se pueda crear esto en Chile, debido a que esto sí o sí se va a juntar con lo que es la ciberseguridad, ¿ya? En un par de años más tenemos que crear un comité de estandarización chilena de manera de poder discutir estos temas en Chile. La pregunta del millón: ¿por qué partió en estos países y no en Chile? Porque son en estos países los que mayormente desarrollan tecnología, ¿ya? Si ustedes pueden ver, espero que podamos, yes, los países participantes, ustedes figuran acá, la mayoría de estos países participantes son aquellos productores de tecnología, y tenemos miembros observadores que también están atentos a todo este tipo de normas, ¿ya? Por lo tanto, este congreso es muy relevante, la primera vez que en Inacap tenemos tantos científicos juntos en una misma sala, ¿ya? Y eso lo hace relevante dada la tendencia que tiene nuestra universidad de crecer en I+D. Okay. We come back to the logistic information. The ISO committee, the ISO committee will be held here from January 14 to 22. The plenary sessions will be here in the auditorium. The working groups will be in the 3rd floor. This is the 4th floor, okay? And the biometric security seminar will be here only for today. And the social event will be on Wednesday in this time. I'm going to send you an email with the address, but it's walking distance to the hotel, okay? The Wi-Fi, this is the user Wi-Fi and the password for the whole Congress, the Biometric Congress. Oh, we have a change here. It's the same, but in not capital letters. Now it's okay. Okay. This will be. Okay, did you see today the bus? The bus will be available from 14 up to the 22 January for the same place, starting 8 and finish 18, more or less, huh? From January 14 to 22. Now, today for Biometric and Security Conference, we will follow this agenda. We have 2 sessions, the morning session and the afternoon session. In the morning session, we have 3 speakers. The Dr. John Campbell, the Professor Bush, and the CEO, Ricardo Navarro. This, Ricardo is from Chile. It's very important for us, the participation, because it's an example that Chile also can create biometrics software and some experience about that. In the afternoon session, we'll be in parallel with the working groups. We receive near to 20 student papers. We select these 4. It's in Spanish because it's for students, but it's a good opportunity for them try to train your speech. These 4 works, and in the middle we have a coffee break here. The important, after the speaker, we have a lunch in the outside of this building, okay? And that's it. Thank you for your attention. Enjoy Iquique, and you're welcome to Chile. Okay.
Okay, we thank Mr. Juan Tapia Farias, ID, Electricity and Electronics Chief. Now, and continue with this Congress, we want to invite to the stage our Vice Chancellor, Mr. Sebastián Cabello, who wants to say some words, please.
Good morning, everybody. In this opportunity, I'm speaking Spanish. Agradecer de todas formas a nuestras autoridades presentes, a los oficiales del ejército que han estado presentes con nosotros, a las autoridades de Inacap, al vicerrector de la sede de Calama que nos está acompañando, a cada uno de los invitados actuales y también agradecer la instancia de participación. ¿Es posible? Agradecer la instancia de nuestros invitados que han sido recepcionados en nuestra ciudad, a la gente que está hoy día participando, a cada uno de ustedes. Sean todos muy bienvenidos.
Good morning. Welcome to our expositors, our visitors, our Army Forces, ambassadors. Welcome all to our Congress.
Para nosotros es muy importante la visita hoy día de los científicos, investigadores y las empresas.
For us, it's very important to have you all visitors, scientific people, to our business, to our university.
Y también es sumamente relevante como institución poder posicionar a esta sede de Iquique en temas de biometría y conocimiento, en la generación de conocimiento que estamos aportando hoy día a nuestra región.
For us as an institution, it's very important to be with you, to be well placed in this scientific program. It's very important for our technology, and you are so welcome to continue helping us with this support, scientific support for our institution.
Y para finalizar, quiero presentarles nuestra institución en un video en la cual lo hemos hecho en inglés y en español para poder mostrar cómo ha sido nuestra integración en estos últimos 52 años.
To end with this presentation, I want you to share this video that was made in English and Spanish to show you the welcome and everything related with our institution. So be pleased and have a look at it, because he did it with a very good effort. Yeah.
Inacap is part of the higher educational system. It has been established by the Universidad Tecnológica de Chile, the Professional Institute, the Technical Training Center, and the Technical Training Program with 26 campuses in 15 regions throughout the country. Our aim is to teach people with values and help them acquire the skills and proficiency in their areas in order to improve the competitiveness in the different productive areas of the country, to be completely focused in our three missions: a teaching program that is appropriate and of high quality, research and development activities aimed at solving educational and productive challenges and a long-lasting market relation in our society. It has been 52 years since we started this educational program. Currently, we have 121,000 students, and we continue expanding our educational work to satisfy and even to anticipate to the coming country needs. Chile is growing fast and more competitive in this global world era. The research and investigation development line in our institutions is mainly based on encouraging educational and productive initiatives carried out by professors and students from our different areas. Inacap has become the largest institution of higher education in Chile, and we will continue to focus on contributing in the training of the professional that Chile needs. Everybody welcome to BIoseg's Congress in Iquique, Chile.
I repeat, welcome to BIoseg Congress and enjoy this moment. Thank you.
thank Mr. Sebastián Cabello, our Vice Chancellor, and Ms. Mary Saez for your traduction. In order to continue with this Congress, we are going to invite our first speaker, PhD, John Campbell Nest, from United States, that will talk about demographic bias in biometric system, please.
Okay, let's start this. Sorry. I appreciate the opportunity to speak here, even though I have to admit I was informed at the last minute. Your speaker was supposed to be Dr. Patrick Grother from NIST, and unfortunately, due to the infinite wisdom of President Trump and the government shutdown, Patrick is not able to be here. He is in Washington enjoying some time off. And so he asked me to come in his place and give this talk. So, to clarify, my name is John Campbell. I am actually from Canada, not the US. And this research is sponsored by the Defense Research and Development Canada. So it's basically research in bias in biometric systems that is sponsored by the Canadian Department of Defense. Because they are interested in things that affect security. And it turns out that this does affect security. So, moving on. Let's see if this works. Yay, okay. So, the talk that Patrick was going to give was called The Face Recognition Revolution, Accuracy Gains and Outstanding Challenges. Since he's not here, and since he has no access to his own slides, you want me to use this? Oh, excuse me. Oh, it wasn't updating. Sorry, we have technical difficulties. Yep. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay. So this was the title of the talk that Patrick was going to give. He has no access to his own slides. He has no email. But I thought I would summarize what he was going to say approximately in 2 slides. Make it very quick and very simple. So, photomorphing is very difficult to detect. This is one of the outstanding challenges in facial recognition. Photomorphing is a problem, and if you allow submission of printed photos for your facial recognition, it's a very big problem and basically impossible to detect. The simplest solution to that problem is to use live capture. Second big problem and second outstanding challenge in facial recognition, we still don't have a standard solution for facial image quality. We have NFIQ and NFIQ2, which were developed by NIST and give standardized quality for fingerprints. We don't have something equivalent for facial recognition. So SC37, that's this standards group here, should probably be working on developing a better facial image quality standard. Next thing, by using deep learning AI, we've improved the accuracy, but we don't understand how the algorithms work. And bias in AI systems is a known issue for many different applications of AI. And now, because we're using it so much in biometrics, it's become an issue in biometrics. Here's an example of the slide of the improvement in accuracy. This is the latest one-to-one face recognition results from the NIST one-to-one FRVT test. These results are phenomenal, by the way. The accuracy is amazing. If you look at this on those Visa photos, that's a false match rate of 1 in a million. So the algorithm will only mistake someone's photo for someone else 1 time out of a million. And even then, it only has a 0.4% chance of not recognizing the individual. So that's a really good accuracy. Even on the wild photos, which are basically random photos from the internet that have a variety of poses and can be very difficult, 1 in 100,000, I believe that is, we can achieve 5% false non-match rate, which is pretty amazing. These results represent a quantum leap forward in the accuracy of facial recognition that's occurred over the last 2 to 3 years with the introduction of deep learning AI to facial recognition. It's truly impressive. Okay, just so you understand, and this is my paraphrase of Patrick's talk. So NIST has been running these tests since 1993. There's a list there of the tests that they've run. There was the ferret test, which is the first one in 1993, and then a whole variety of FRVT tests. Now they have what's called FRVT 1-to-1 ongoing, which means there's a continuous testing of algorithms. And last year they just ran FRVT 1-to-N. Every single test showed performance improvements. There were a couple of times when we had an order of magnitude performance improvement, but the most recent tests, which include 65 algorithms from 38 developers, have shown what I call a quantum leap forward in accuracy. And now automated facial recognition is superior to even the best humans. It wasn't 2 years ago, but it is today. There's no question, in my mind. So we've achieved all of this. It's great. But the question then becomes, at what cost? And that's where we get this demographic bias issue, because AIs have a problem with bias. And there are lots of instances of this. So we can look at some of the problems. There was a famous issue with Google in 2015 where they had basically a classifier that would look at an image and tell you what it was. And when it looked at images of gorillas, it called them black people. And this was kind of embarrassing for Google because people don't want to be called a gorilla, right? So that was very embarrassing. In 2017, the US Congress complained quite a bit to the FBI because they had a 20% error rate in the NGI facial recognition. And particularly they said that their facial recognition error rates were very bad for people of color, basically African Americans. There was a project in 2017 with IBM and Microsoft and a company called Face++ with gender classification, and I note, well, they called it gender classification. And I note that some of your academic talks this afternoon will be talking about that. It turned out that the gender classification worked very well for white males, but very poorly for black females. Anyway, and then last year there were more hearings about this, letters from Congress to NIST demanding that they do something about it. It continues to be a topic of ongoing discussion that the new facial recognition, while very accurate, doesn't work as well for certain groups of people. So there's lots of noise about this in the press, and the question that I want to address today is this a real problem that we need to worry about operationally for operational facial recognition systems, or is it relatively minor? So here at ISO, at SC37, we have started trying to explore this problem with a technical report 22116. It's called Identifying and Mitigating the Differential Impact of Demographic Factors in Biometric Systems. I wanted to call it Bias in Biometric Systems, but I was overruled. So it has a name that doesn't say the word bias, but it's really about bias. I'm the editor of that standard, and the co-editors are from the US and Australia, and we have some of the participating countries there. So the focus of this standard is the impact of sex, age, and ethnicity on iris, face, and fingerprint. Hopefully it'll be published in 2020. That's the goal. So next year. You need to understand technical reports aren't binding. It doesn't tell you exactly what to do, but it gives advice, summarizes the research, and gives suggestions. And this TR is being used to raise awareness of the problem and to encourage new research. Some agencies have undertaken new research which has become part of this standard, specifically NIST in the US, Defense Research, my group, in Canada, and some have contributed existing research that already existed. The Canadian Border Services Agency had some interesting research on iris recognition that it chose to contribute. It turns out that we have a lot of information for facial recognition, but much less for iris and fingerprint. Some of the results are kind of obvious. They make common sense. We know that fingerprint recognition is harder for older people because they have dry skin, they have arthritis, various problems that make it harder for them to present a good finger. We also know that facial recognition has poor accuracy for young children. That makes sense because, as we all know, when you look at a 6-month-old baby and then you look at them again when they're 5 years old, their face changes a lot from 6 months to 5 years. So we expect that the accuracy is going to be lower on young children. But some results are less obvious. So let's take a look at a few results here. We've noted in several studies that in fingerprints, the average quality score for females is lower than it is for males. So that means that females get rejected more for having poor quality fingerprints than males do on average. But the matching accuracy for females is not necessarily worse than that of males. So it may be a disjunct between what the quality score measures and what the algorithms actually use to do the match. For iris recognition, this is quite interesting. The graph that you see here is from CBSA, and it shows the normalized Hamming distance as a function of age. And yeah, it's fairly visible, I think. Yeah. So you can see that the normalized Hamming distance, which is a measure of how far apart two iris templates from the same person are, goes down substantially. Well, it's a very simple U-shaped curve, right? So it's almost parabolic. And that means that the Hamming distance is higher, which means it's a worse match for children under 12 and adults over 70. And it gets best around the age of, I think, 35, roughly. Then we've got the fact that failure to enroll rates on this CBSA study, which is of 780,000 people approximately, the failure to enroll rates were higher for children under 12 and adults over 70 than they were for people in the middle. So for that reason, it seems that iris recognition works better for middle-aged people than it does for young children or older people. We're not entirely sure why. It's just an observation. Now, we also know that facial recognition has much higher error rates for young children than for adults. That makes sense. But the magnitude is quite substantial. So at a fixed threshold, if you understand how biometric algorithms work, typically what happens is you fix the match threshold. Anything above that is considered a match. Anything below that is a non-match. So if we fix the threshold, we establish a false match rate and a false non-match rate. The false match rate tells us how often a face matches against another face of a different person and is above the threshold. The false non-match rate tells us how often two images of the same face fail to match and are below the threshold. So we find that at a fixed threshold, the false match rate and the false non-match rate both increase. So normally you would expect that as one error goes down, the other goes up. But in this case, they both increase as the age decreases below 18, and they increase very substantially for children under 4. We also note that false non-match rate seems to decrease as age increases up to about age 60. So that means from the time you're born until about age 60, it gets easier to recognize your face. Is that because your face becomes more distinctive with more features? We're not sure, but it's just a fact. You get easier to recognize with facial recognition as you get older. We also note most facial recognition algorithms perform worse for females than for males. I want to make sure I don't run out of time here, and I have a lot of slides, so I'll try not to take too long. At a fixed threshold, most algorithms show false match rate and false non-match rate are both higher for females. A few algorithms will show false match rate lower, but not false non-match rate. But no algorithms that have been tested so far out of the 68 that NIST has tested show lower FMR and FNMR for females. So that tells you that there is a systematic bias across all the algorithms that they tend to do worse for females than for males. But this brings me to another point. What do we mean by female? Haha. So, turns out when you review the studies, people talk about males versus females. Sometimes they talk about sex, and sometimes they talk about gender. But they don't really explain how this was defined. Passports, for instance, use sex, and ICAO says that you can have M, F, or X for sex, with X being unknown or undefined or other or whatever you want to call it. But several countries now, including Canada and New Zealand, allow people to select their designation. So you can choose to have whichever one of those three letters you want in your passport. But of course, if I, as a man, and I'm quite happy being a man, I don't want to be a woman, if I could actually choose to have F in my passport by saying that I felt like a woman. But that would not be talking about my sex, as far as I'm concerned. That would be talking about my gender, my identity, how I feel. So it's important to understand the difference. So we know that you have genetics, your DNA, and then you have the phenotypic expression of your genetics. That's how your DNA is expressed, right? We know that that's very difficult to change. It's possible, maybe, at this point, to change your genetics, but it's very difficult and quite dangerous. However, your external appearance and your behavior are easy to change, and I could choose to behave in a more feminine way by wearing more makeup and doing various things, and that would make me appear more feminine, but it wouldn't change my sex. I'd still be a man. It turns out biometric performance is affected by both sex and gender, by the DNA and your biology, and by how you behave. So for instance, if I wear a very large amount of makeup, it can significantly change the appearance of my face, and that makes it more difficult to match my face from before, so it lowers my it increases my false non-match rate with myself, but it's an expression of gender because I've chosen to wear the makeup. It's not about sex. Anyway, so we came up with these definitions at the last ISO meeting, I believe. And they are: sex is a classification as male, female, or some other category based on an assessment of primary sexual characteristics. Basically, that's what happens when a baby is born. The doctor looks at the baby and goes, it's a boy, or it's a girl. Or sometimes it's neither, because of problems with genetics that happen sometimes. So that's easy, that's sex. Gender is a classification as male, female, or some other category, whatever that may be, based on social, cultural, or behavioral factors. And it says it's determined through self-declaration or self-presentation and may change over time. So for instance, I could decide that I feel like I am more of a woman than a man. I could change my behavior, change the way I present myself. Maybe hard for me, but you know, I could shave off my beard and wear more makeup and appear more like a woman. That would be a change in my gender. So I think it's important to understand these things because they have different effects on biometrics. Things like the inter-ridge spacing on your fingers are highly dependent on sex, because women typically have a lower inter-ridge spacing from birth than men do, just due to their genetics. But things like the amount of makeup and type of makeup you wear, which affect facial recognition, are more an impact of gender. All right. So now I'll throw in some interesting results about this, thanks to NIST. This one is talking about age. So what you see here is for facial recognition, at a fixed threshold, the fixed threshold is supposed to give you a false match rate of 1 in 1,000, which is basically this middle blue color in the middle there. Or actually, I guess it's the almost blue to red, that transition between blue and red, okay? But now, if you take individuals that are of the same age and match them against other individuals of the same age, you get the on the left. What that shows is that the false match rate goes up hugely for young children matched against other young children, but it goes down hugely for young children matched against old people, right, in the top left corner, bottom right corner. The second graph on the right shows that if we also match them by sex and basically country of origin, ethnic origin, which has been divided into a variety of categories by NIST, the false match rate goes up even higher. And the really shocking thing is how much it goes up. So at a threshold that's supposed to give you a false match rate of 1 in 1,000, for young children who are matched by sex and ethnic origin, so you match some white 3-year-old male against another white 2-year-old male or 1-year-old male, the false match rate is 40%. Instead of 1 in 1,000, it goes up to 40%. That's an increase of 400. That's huge. Now, we also know that facial recognition performs varies significantly with ethnicity, as well as age and sex. And at a fixed threshold, this can affect both the false non-match rate and the false match rate. We know that the false non-match rate might be higher by a factor of 2 to 4. So the chances of not being matched against yourself might be twice as bad, twice as high, or 4 times as high if you are from a certain demographic group. But given how accurate the new algorithms are, that's not usually a problem. However, it also turns out that the false match rate can be higher by a factor of 2 up to 20. And for most of the algorithms tested, Asians, including Koreans, Chinese, Japanese, have the highest false match rate. It also turns out that the demographic factors compound with each other. So if we match people for sex, age, and ethnicity, we get a significant increase again in the error rates. And this becomes a security problem, which is why my agency is interested in it, the defense research people, for things like an automatic border control system that uses facial recognition. So again, let's look at these results from NIST. In this case, the heat map is showing people who are matched against people of similar ethnic group. And you can see that, again, the nominal threshold should give you a color right in the middle of this bar, so the light blue. But for certain ethnic groups, it becomes a very dark red. Like this, even this. These represent significant security risks to people from those particular ethnic groups if you're using facial recognition to manage a secure system, such as a border control system. Good. So let's take an example. Considering an airport using automated border control system, gates, with facial recognition. Okay, I want to say at the beginning, these numbers are all examples. They don't represent performance from any specific airport in any particular country, but they are representative of real numbers from several. I have access to data from different places, and they're representative of real numbers from several different places. And so we do our operational testing at the airport with real travelers to get what our match threshold should be. So the border agency or whoever's in charge of the airport will do that testing and establish a threshold. And we can get an overall performance of false match rate 1 in 1,000. So if you use somebody else's passport, you only have a 1 in 1,000 chance of being let into the country. So that's good. Well, that's a reasonable level of security. At that point, the false non-match rate is 2%. So we reject about 2% of the people we think they don't match their own passports, and we send them for more processing. That's probably okay. For some nations, however, the false non-match rate might be 6%. So it's a little bit higher. It means that if you have a large flight arriving from that country, say you might have needs extra staff because you'll have 6% of the people rejected and you need more staff to process them. But now let's assume that you swap your passport with somebody from the same sex, the same country of origin, and similar age within plus or minus 5 years. If you're going to try and swap a passport with somebody, this is logical. You're not going to swap. I am not going to swap my passport with a 5-year-old girl. It's obvious that's not me. I would swap with another man, middle-aged, and white. Right? So, makes sense, right? If you're a criminal, that's what you do. So you assume the passport is swapped with someone from the same sex, same country, nationality, similar age. We can evaluate this by basically using offline matching, where we take passports from other people that are of the same rough age, country of origin, and sex, and we match them against stored video streams from the gates for other people. When we do that, we get a false match rate up to 5%. And remember, it's supposed to be 0.1%. It's supposed to be 1 in 1,000. It can go as high as 1 in 20, which is bad. For young children, it's even worse. It can be as high as 1 in 2 to 3. This is a problem. If I'm worried about child trafficking, this is a major problem for ABC gate security. So it represents a severe security risk. What do we do about it? Is there a solution? So the simplest solution, let's just adjust the threshold. So instead of being 1 in 1,000, overall, we can make it 1 in 1,000 for the worst case scenario, right? But if we do that, now the false match rate goes up, and for some countries, the false match rate might be as high as 25%. And an ABC system that rejects 1 in 4 passports or 1 in 4 people doesn't work very well. That's not operationally acceptable for most border agencies. So that's not a great solution because it means a lot more people get processed manually, which means more staffing, more queuing. It's not great. Another option, which I think is a better solution, is that we measure the performance for each country individually. We check imposters that have the same age, the same sex, the same country of origin, and then we can define different match thresholds for different demographic groups. So then we can dynamically adjust the match threshold at the gate based on the information we read from the passport. If we do that, we can make it so that the false match rate is always less than 1 in 1,000, which is what we wanted, 0.1%. And most countries will still have a false non-match rate below 2%. And a few countries will be a little bit above 2%, but we can manage it quite well with our staffing. So if we have sufficient performance data to actually measure every country separately, and we have the capability of dynamically adjusting the threshold, we can mitigate a lot of the problems caused by the demographic bias in the algorithm. How do we get that? Okay, so here's an example from New Zealand. It's actually a bit of work, but they've been doing it. They have e-gates in New Zealand that have been in operation since 2009. They have arrivals and departures at Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, and Queenstown airports. So there's eight precincts, one for exiting passengers, one for entering passengers at each of those 4 airports. The gates record what we call a video template. Basically, the gates have multiple cameras, and they turn on for a period of time, and every face that is recorded in the field of view is added to the template. So we end up with a big, basically it's cheaper than saving a video stream. We could save the entire video stream from each camera, but that's really bulky. So instead we save all the templates from every face in the field of view of each camera. And because of a convenient thing in their law about enforcement in New Zealand, because they are required to have the images and the video streams from the gates available if there is a law enforcement proceeding about someone who passed through the border. So for instance, if you were accused of smuggling drugs through the border or bringing something illegal through the border, they want to have the video of you crossing the border for a period of time. So they retain everything for, I believe it's 30 days to see if there's going to be an enforcement, and then they delete it. So they're able to keep all this stuff and then do offline matching. So we can play back different people's passports against other people at the gates. And when we do that, we can filter all of those imposters by country of origin, age, sex, and various other things. So doing that, New Zealand has been able to calculate match thresholds for a whole bunch of different demographic groups. And at each gate, when it reads the data from the passport, it gets a dynamic threshold, which says, here's what the match threshold should be for this person based on the age, sex, and country of origin of the passport. So in real operations at New Zealand, we have measured false match rate for some demographic groups that's 200 times higher than nominal. So that means if they're running at a false match rate nominally of 1 in 1,000, some people are running at 1 in 5, which is not acceptable to New Zealand border, and I doubt would be acceptable to any border control system. Having a 1 in 5 chance of getting in on someone else's passport, it's not good. But we've also limited the minimum age to use the gates to 12. We think, based on performance data, it could go as low as 10. But if you start to go lower than 10 with a 5-year passport, they're getting down to that 5-year-old range for the original photo, where facial recognition is just really not accurate. So anyone lower than 12 currently has to be processed manually. And we might be lowering that to 10 shortly. But because of the fact that they can dynamically adjust the threshold, they don't have this problem. We don't have to worry about the false match rate being 1 in 5. The false match rate for everybody is below 1 in 1,000 because we just adjust the thresholds for all these different groups. But it only worked because they were able to collect all that information and understand what the threshold should be for all the different demographic groups. And that takes a lot of time and effort. And basically, my conclusion is that there are major security issues caused by demographic bias in the algorithms. Yes, the algorithms are better, but they have this huge bias issue. The only effective way to mitigate them is to collect sufficiently detailed performance information, and then we can have dynamic thresholds. But even with dynamic thresholds, young children are a problem. Facial recognition should not be used on children 5 or younger. It's just not reliable enough. And that means if you have a 5-year passport, 10 should be the cutoff. I believe that our recommendation would be that all ABC systems at the border should include performance testing that includes demographic factors so that it can be determined exactly what the threshold should be for all the different demographic groups. And I recommend ISO TR 22116 as a good reference on this just to get started, but we still need more research and we continue to work on that. So I think I'm in time. Thank you very much, everyone. Should we do questions now? Okay, any questions? Nobody wants to tell me I'm an idiot? Yeah, of course you do, Greg. Of course you do. Yes.
What do you think about you can change your face as you want, but your iris
Yes.
can change the time.
That is true. Iris recognition in general is more accurate than facial recognition. There's no question, and it's harder to change. You can. There are some flaws in iris recognition, which we don't need to get into here, but overall it has less demographic bias. Yes, there is some variation with sex and some variation with age, but it's still not enough variation to significantly affect the performance. Yes, I agree with that.
But considering demographic information, what do you think?
I think the iris, the demographic bias in iris recognition is much less than in facial recognition. Yes?
Thanks for a very good summary talk, and certainly we'll look up that TR. Just a question here around the way in which you deal with ethnicity in your New Zealand case study. Normally, the results from FRBT ongoing do this by nationality in the passport. Do you use that same marker, or do you use an assessment of ethnicity based on subjective assessment?
We've done both. So in New Zealand, we ran tests where we had manual classification of ethnicity, which was a tedious process. We only did it once because somebody has to sit down and do thousands and tens of thousands of images and classify them all by ethnicity, which is not much fun. And so we've done that. And then we've also done it by country. And the results are relatively similar. There are some slight differences. Obviously, some countries have a very wide spectrum of ethnic groups, and so classifying by country gives you the danger there that you're mishmashing together a bunch of groups. But on the other hand, classifying by country also allows us to address the fact that e-passports are of highly variable quality, and that varying quality also affects the false match rate and the false non-match rate. So I think realistically for an operational system, it's probably better to go with country of origin because that's your most reasonable thing that you can measure. If you want to do a one-off test occasionally where you actually classify tens of thousands of images manually, go for it. In our experience, we didn't find the results to be too different.
Other questions? Okay, clap to the speaker again, please.
Thank you.
thank Mr. John Campbell from Canada, not from the United States. And now, following our Congress, we want to invite our second speaker, PhD Christoph Busch, DASEC from Germany, that will expose biometric and internet security topic. An applause for that, please.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you very much for inviting me to give a presentation here. It's a great honor, and thanks you for the host for hosting our conference here. My name is Christoph Busch. I have 3 logos here on my slide. I'm working, if I'm not working for standards, which is of course the top priority in my business life. The second priority is to be a board member of the European Association for Biometrics, and I have 2 academic affiliations, one in Norway and one in Germany. Yeah, for those who find some content in this presentation of interest, you don't have to take pictures. The slides are available on my website, so if you go to christophbusch.de and then in the section about talks, then you find these slides. I want to start my presentation with a personal remark that is around this picture here. This picture is now in my living room for 25 years. It's on the wall in a printed version. Who recognize the content? Not too many in the room, so I have to explain it a little bit. 25 years ago, easy to calculate from the gray hair, I was a student. So if there are still PhD students in the room, I can tell you PhD student time is the best time in your life. Because you're young, you have many adventures in front of you, and you have freedom, academic freedom, business freedom, and freedom to travel. So I was traveling at that time, and the reason that I could travel was second year of PhD career. In the first year, I was quite ambitious, and I had 2 conference papers. My supervisor said, you did a good job in the first year, so you can potentially have vacation. I said, okay, how long is the vacation potentially to be? And he said, you can take the full year vacation, which is 4 weeks period. And I said, okay, I go for 4 weeks. And where did I go? To this place, and this place is Chile. So this is actually Puerto Natales. I booked a flight to Santiago, jumped on the train, took me to Puerto Montt, and then I took a quite bumpy road on the seashore. Very recommendable if you have a good stomach. And then arrived in Puerto Natales, and then hiked, I think, for 2 weeks in the Patagonia area, so quite impressive. So since then, I had the best memories on my PhD period associated with this picture, so it's a great personal pleasure to be back in this wonderful country. And now I have the opportunity to go to the very north end of this country and see the other flavors of this country. Yeah, thank you again, Juan, for organizing this meeting here, and thank you for the entire team to make this possible. I want to talk in this presentation a little bit about security of biometric systems. And if we consider that biometrics have the primary purpose of strengthening the security of access control by having a non-delegatable authentication factor, we see that in our biometric reference architecture that we see here, we have a capture device, we have a signal processing subsystem, we have a storage subsystem, we have a comparison subsystem, and a decision subsystem. And each of these subsystems is, unfortunately, potentially also attributed with some risks that we have to anticipate. And our standards that we produce here have the good habit to, well, interact with academic research. So a lot of academic research is reflected in standards. So an example is here the reference architecture for attacks on biometric systems outlined in ISO 30107 Part 1, which is basically inspired by the work of Nalini Rata from IBM research. So what you see in this picture is the potential attack points on biometric systems which we should be aware of and which we should tackle and provide countermeasures such that with a biometric access control factor in your operational system, your operations become more secure and not less secure than they were before. So, as time allows, I would focus in this presentation a little bit on this bluish area here, which is the capture device subsystem. And this is where the human, the individual, interacts with a sensor or a set of sensors that are composed in a capture device. You can see that potentially also the other subsystems need to be addressed in a security perspective. So this first component is potentially attacked by a presentation attack. And if this term presentation attack is new to you, yes, we take responsibility for that because this term was actually invented 5 years back in our standardization community. What is a presentation attack? It is more or less a new understanding of what you can consider to be expressed in this cartoon, a keyring of a criminal that tries to collect eyeballs and gummy fingers and what have you. And these artifacts are actually replicates of biometric characteristics of some victims that he tries to impersonate with the intention, of course, to get access to those victims' assets in terms of physical access and physical valuables or computer access, as in this case. Now, this issue of attacking capture devices, or formerly we said spoofing capture devices, is not a new topic. This has been around in the academic literature for some years, and we can say even decades. So soon after I finished my PhD in '97, I had the pleasure of joining a research group that had the task for the German government to investigate the spoofing resistance or presentation attack resistance of some fingerprint devices. And so we did, and this was back in 2000 when we started with commercial sensors, and we were tasked to elaborate materials that could have the same or similar properties than real skin and real finger surfaces. So we were looking at some materials, silicon, for instance, which is flexible and can adopt the same humidity as real skin. And then the question is, if you want to impersonate someone, how can you get hold of the original fingerprint presentation? And of course, if you assume that the attack should work without the support of the target victim, well, then you look for a latent representation, a latent sample, which you can find on the glass. This glass here, if I drink a nap, then you can get my latent print from this glass later on if you want. Good. So scanning of this print is possible with a little bit of laser powder, as we see here, and then magnifying that digitized latent print and do a little bit of photoshopping that will close all the ridge lines that we see in the digitized version, and then we scale it to different versions, and we pour silicon on this circuit board, and here we have our silicon artifact. And this artifact, as you can realize, is now 19 years old, and it still works and can still open a good number of fingerprint sensors. So this was, well, sort of concern for the German government back in this time. However, it was published, and the federal police went to the Canon conference in 2000 in Canada and published this work. So this was our early work on fingerprint recognition, and of course, if we take now a more wider step and see what are those presentation attacks, we have to distinguish on the case where I have a certain target victim that I want to impersonate. So is it a one-to-one access to Christoph's smartphones, or is it a one-to-N access to the university database where Christoph is enrolled? So this say a positive access scenario. If we are dealing with face recognition and not fingerprint recognition, we still have to consider this potential attack. And as John expressed in his presentation, you would, as a criminal, look for a lookalike, same gender, same sex, and same age, and so forth. And if there is no suitable candidate in the database available, you can then still go to a makeup artist. And as you can see here, this artist on the lower left has changed his appearance just by makeup to impersonate some of well-known characters. And this is an impressive modification of your facial appearance, and it's a serious issue for face recognition systems. So for fingerprint recognition, we would research on silicon artifacts and so on and so forth. For face recognition, first identify the most similar lookalike, and then we consult a makeup artist to make the work complete. Now that's only one part of the story, to impersonate someone else. The other part of the story is the so-called concealer attack, and we also consider this as a presentation attack flavor. And concealer is more on the, say, forensic use case, where you have a database of known criminals, and the criminal is aware of being in this database, say in a watch list that prevents known criminals to enter a soccer stadium and the like. And as he is aware of his enrollment, he tries to avoid being recognized. So he conceals his appearance by departing from the standard pose, by departing from the standard facial expression, which should be neutral, or by actively covering his hair with a cap or with LEDs attached to his glasses, or again, as we can see here on the right, with an active makeup, which would then be a critical factor for the face detection component and make the face recognition as a subsequent component impossible to operate. Now, these two scenarios, imposter attacks and concealer attacks, were basically driving the development of a standard that we established a few years back. This standard is one of the achievements that is freely available in the ISO portal. So if you go to this website, you can download the standard that talks about concealer attacks and imposter attacks. And of course, as we are a standardization body, we like to define the terms that we work with. So now you have an idea of what a presentation attack is. It is a presentation to a biometric capture subsystem with the goal of interfering with the operation of the biometric system. And if you want to maintain security of your operational system, you have, of course, to establish some countermeasures, meaning you need to detect these attacks. And if we attack the attacks, we talk about presentation attack detection, automated determination of such a presentation attack. And here on the bottom, you see the two flavors: impostor, impersonating someone else, and concealer, avoiding being matched against his own reference in the database. In the standard that you could potentially download, you can then also look at what are the ways of subdividing this area, and we subdivide, for instance, by presentation attack instruments. The silicon finger is just one object that could be used to impersonate someone else. We can think of many other artifacts, and artifacts are representing a copy or a plagiate of some real biometric characteristic, but we can also think of human presentation attack instruments, meaning that you can alter your finger by surgery or by physical aberration of the finger ridges, and so on and so forth. So artificial attack instruments is one domain, and human alteration of the face, makeup, and so forth is the other domain. Now, why is this issue of presentation attack detection becoming more and more important? One aspect that was driving these standards is, of course, the security of the borders. We have more and more travelers going through our airport processes. We have less and less resources to handle all these travelers, so there's a automated border control, or at least semi-automated border control, meaning that the devices in place must be robust against such attacks. And on the other hand, as we have likely seen since the introduction of mobile phones with embedded fingerprint sensors, the fingerprint sensor is not only used to unlock the phone, it is also used for financial transactions and so on and so forth. So what we see here is a video from the German Chaos Computer Club, which was released just a few days after the first Apple Touch ID was issued in September 2013. So basically the same concept that we did in the early 2000s, having a silicon finger and collecting the artifacts that you have seen here on the surface of this phone. Now, what can you do against this? You know the evolution of the smartphones, and of course all the smartphones come along with a quite impressive camera and a good resolution. So of course you can work with finger photo recognition. We did so in cooperation with the German BSI, the Federal Agency for Information Security, which happens to have a quite extensive collection of known artifacts that are used in common criteria testing of fingerprint sensors. And in cooperation with BSI and industry partners, what we did was to work on a finger photo capture software which works with the embedded cameras, and as you can see in the finger photo, that is a bit poor contrast here, but you see at least the strong light reflection near the fingertip, and that is stemming from the camera LED. The reflection depends on the shape of the finger, of course, but also depends on the consistency of the finger skin and the angle of the finger towards the camera. Now, fortunately, all that factors that determine the reflection are different for the bona fide finger or for the bona fide presentation, and are different from artifacts as we have seen before. So what we investigated, illustrated here, is how is the reflection is illustrated here for the bona fide finger, how is there a reflection for various artifacts, and we see that from the many artifacts that we were provided by the German BSI, only one single gelatin artifact showed an equivalent reflection as the bona fide finger, and only one single artifact was able to fool our presentation attack detector. So that is a, let's say, workaround for a secure smartphone-based fingerprint authentication, and you can anticipate that with the legacy algorithms working on the fingerprint recognition, the accuracy is more or less stable from what you know from the contact-based fingerprint recognition. If you anticipate that this is not sufficient for the criminal activity of your attacker, then the, let's say, Mercedes class in German terms is a fingerprint capture device, which, caveat, is not suitable yet for mobile devices. That is the observation of the interior of the fingerprints by optical coherence tomography. If you're talking about interior of the fingerprint, many of you may think in the first place of finger vein recognition. This is not the idea here. As we see in the cross-sectional diagrams, finger veins are quite in the interior. Here, what we investigate is the observation of the sweat gland layer just below the skin, and we observe the liveness of the finger by observing these finger glands, sweat glands. In the image here on the left, you see some vertical stripes. That's not poor quality of Christoph's slides. This is actually, these stripes represents all these sweat glands that go from the dermis layer to the outer epidermis in the surface of the skin. To make such sweat glands visible, you need some dedicated devices. BSI has run a project to provide such a prototype that is illustrated here, and what you can see on this slide is the high resolution of this device, quite different from what we know at, say, fingerprint sensors at the border. And remarkable is that the capture area is still quite wide, 20 by 20 millimeters, and as you can see, 6 millimeters going into depth. The next slide here should show a video. Yes, that gives you more impression on how these sweat glands are vertically striped. So what you can see here is actually a fingerprint that is upside down. So the outer part of the fingerprint is at the bottom. It is curved as you would anticipate, and in the upper area you see the inner fingerprint, which is the intersection of the dermis to the epidermis. And as a matter of fact, security comes here by also observing the pattern that you see in the inner fingerprint with the pattern that you see in the outer fingerprint. If they do not correspond, something is wrong here. So we have actually two measures of proving the bona fide property of this finger. Number one is that you see sweat glands. Not in all the scans you actually happen to have sweat gland. But number two is if the pattern in the inner fingerprint and the pattern in the outer fingerprint do not correspond, you should likely decide on rather an attack than a bona fide presentation case. So this is illustrated here. The internal fingerprint from the OCT scan is transcoded to a binary impression here in the bottom. So that's the internal fingerprint. That's from the outer surface, the transformed outer fingerprint, and you as a forensic expert hopefully come to the conclusion, yes, they do both stem from the same pattern and from the same Henry class. Good. The caveat with that is that's not suitable for smartphones, so that's rather for unsupervised border crossing. And the other caveat is you have a little bit of data volume here that you have to process with 3000 dpi and 20 by 20 millimeters, 6 millimeter depth. So you need smart algorithms. We have smart PhD students that can generate such smart algorithms, and B, you need a little bit of graphical processing unit to make this happen. But once you have both combined in an efficient manner, you can see that in less than 2 seconds we are capable of processing such data. Good. Yeah, let's take the fingers at a side. We talked about face recognition already. So what is with face and eyes? We worked on that modality as well. So here is a short summary of a PhD project working on ocular biometrics. And the idea was to distinguish between an attack and a bona fide presentation by looking at the slight movements of the eye that stems from the muscles and the location in the ocular environment. This movement is enhanced by a method called the Euler and video magnification, And we can see that illustrated here on the right-hand side. The very tiny movements are emphasized, and based on that, we can then distinguish between an attack presentation and a bona fide presentation. Now, all that is nice. We like to measure. Academics like to measure, and standardization people like even more to measure things, and we do so by measuring false positives and false negatives. You know these from John's presentations and from your own experience, but when we talk about presentation attacks, we have on the one hand side the APCR, which is the attack presentation classification error rate. So we have an attack which was falsely classified to be a bona fide presentation from a genuine data subject. And then we also have the good ones that have been falsely accused, so that is a bona fide data subject with a bona fide presentation that has been incorrectly classified as an attack presentation in a specific scenario. So this is what is defined in this ISO standard that came out of our committee. And if we apply this to the academic research that we have done, we need, for this video magnification, we need to do this analysis, of course, of sequences of video frames. We have 25 video frames per second, so you can see that with only less than a second, so less than 12 video frames, we're able to distinguish the bona fide presentations here in green from the attack presentations here in red for various presentations. So referring to these two measures, APCR and BPCR, we can see that for this specific investigation, it is possible to clearly separate the two presentation sets and get a zero error rate. Good. Widely used at borders is face recognition, and if we talk about face recognition, we should anticipate that there are very simple artifacts that can be used to attack such systems. You can think of getting access of facial image of Christoph, getting hold of his passports, and then presenting a printout of Christoph's face to a border officer. The face recognition software would likely then spot the landmarks, do the signal processing, and come to the conclusion, yes, that is Christoph. And from a 2D perspective, 2D signal perspective, that is likely true. So what has been proposed in the academic literature? It has been proposed to introduce some challenge response, to ask people to blink, and then you would be capable of doing a blink detection or correspondingly analyze what has been spoken to synchronize the words with the lip movements and so on and so forth. That's a nice idea, but today we have very good displays, and to replay a video in high quality and to have unit selection attacks where you can modify the sentence that should be spoken, that's not a very challenging task, so that very simple approaches won't work any longer. So the other factor that we need to emphasize is face recognition is more and more used in unsupervised environments, and you see that smartphone vendors go this path, and by good reason. One reason is that you don't leave facial latent prints on the display, like you do for latent prints of your finger. And the other reason is that, of course, it turns out to be more convenient than fingerprint recognition. Good, but unsupervised environments, that is one scenario. The other scenario is that we need to be aware that the number of smartphones used for financial transactions, for instance, is significantly increasing and continues to increase, as we see in this prediction here. What can be done from a technical perspective to counter this? You have seen that with the Apple iPhone X. You go for a 3D perspective. We did so in our lab as well. We didn't follow the path that Apple went, but we followed the path that stems from this light field technology, which is a quite old concept, but reached the market only 5 to 10 years ago, where you have essentially a panoptic camera or directional camera, meaning that you get a field of light where you have multiple depth images in one single shot. And the advantage is, on the one hand side, that there's no need to adjust the lens to the set focus, and the secondary advantage is that you have multiple depth images, which enables you to distinguish from a flat subject like the printout or a video display to a curved 3D subject. These devices getting smaller and smaller. I have illustrated the devices that we used here 5 years back. They are definitely getting portable, and integration in smartphones is a technical option. Here are some examples to illustrate the different depth of field and illustrating the sharpness issue here. So in order to attack such a system, a 3D-based 3D face recognition system, you as an attacker would need more resources, and of course you can take more effort to get hold of Christoph's facial characteristics, and in this case, again, without the support of the enrolled individual. If you happen to have multiple facial images of Christoph, for instance, say frontal and profile images, you can go for internet service, That's My Face, for instance, where you set a little bit of the landmarks to the images that you provide, and then a 3D reconstruction is generated from a standard normal surface of an individual. These 3D devices are illustrated here. You get them shipped, I think, in 3 or 4 weeks, and they are showing the texture that is quite similar to the real texture, but the surface is rather poor, and just by simply observing the edges of the mask to the real surface, you are capable of spotting such mask with a 3D capture device. What we did rather recently, in the last 18 months, was a cooperation with Sebastian Marcel in Idiap in Switzerland. Sebastian had good connections to silicon mask producers. These masks are quite cost intensive and time intensive, so costs are more than 3,000 US dollars per single mask. They take as a precondition to have not only textured images but also a full 3D scan of the surface, and then you can see that they are handcrafted here, having the intention of generating a flexible silicon mask with the same skin reflection properties as the real skin. So if you then solve the remaining problem of replicating the eyes and having maybe hair covering the border of the mask, that is potentially a very critical attack on a face recognition system. Good. Let me summarize on presentation attacks. If you're attracted by the topic of security of capture devices, you should get hold of this framework standard. If you want to measure your academic solution or your industrial solution, I recommend part 3 of this standard, which is testing and reporting of presentation attack detection mechanisms. That comes along with metrics that define the vulnerability of a system, say the imposter attack presentation match rate, for instance, how many target references were matched to the specific presentation attack instruments, and B, it illustrates how you can actually constitute the statistics on attack presentation classification error rates and bona fide presentation classification error rates that is illustrated here. Good. With that, last slide here on reporting. Of course, we have false positive and false negative. You can, as in biometric recognition performance, you can draw nice DET curves that plot the BPCER on the vertical axis against an APCER on the horizontal axis. And then you could understand such a DET plot as a measure of the convenience factor. How often have I incorrectly rejected a bona fide presentation over the security measure or the strength of the function that I have to define. Yeah? So say if I anticipate that maximum 5% of my attacks shall proceed, then I can see that, well, that would correspond for this black system here of an 17% BPCR, which is with limited convenience. But this is just an example that is expressed here. Good. So at the end of the talk, there are references to the standards. I could stop here. I can continue for another half an hour if you like. That's up to the chair. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hello. Okay, we have time for some questions. Some questions?
Yeah, thanks very much for summarising something which is quite a complex field, and I'm sure many of the people in the audience will really appreciate that very good summary, including some of the more practical demonstrations. Yes, we've talked a very long time in the community about these silicone masks, especially the high-level, high-conformant masks. Could you tell us a little bit about how practical these are to wear over an extended period of time in terms of, you know, the kind of sweat that you might have, the interfaces, as well as the way in which that may start deforming differently from the underlying skin?
How convenient it is to have a silicone mask? I must say inconvenient. I wouldn't do so. Seeking here for... slide. So I wouldn't do so. You're sweating underneath the silicone mask, so you definitely don't want to walk around with that mask for hours. But if it's just to get into, let's say, the unsupervised access control to a critical infrastructure, power plant or military base, that's a matter of minutes, if not seconds, and then you can just go in and stripe off the mask. I think from my perspective, what I read in actually Daily Mail UK is an operational scenario. That's a concealer attack with the silicone mask where they were hunting for a specific data subject, and it turns out it was a group of data subjects all wearing the same silicone mask for some criminal activities. Yeah, so it's not an academic scenario. I think it's a real problem.
So on a hot and sunny day like we have here today in Chile, you might not want to do it too.
Yes. If you want, I have my silicone mask in my shelf, so you can borrow that. You can measure the time until you need a beer. I have to work on the ice, so the eye holes look really unrealistic. Yeah. So that's the next work that I do. And I want to know, actually, many of you have likely seen this video of the Taiwanese hackers to attack the Apple iPhone X last, I think, November 2017, if I'm not mistaken. I asked a student last spring to replicate this attack with a printed 3D face mask, and with the That's My Face mask, that you've seen in the slides. He failed, maybe a problem of a student, maybe because Apple is more robust. So this spring, when I return to Norway in end of this month, I will provide to a student a silicon mask and task him again to attack the Apple iPhone. And then next time we meet in July, I can tell you whether this is successful or not. The mask as such is quite nice when it comes to texture and all the winkles that Christoph has. So that's really realistic. Unlike the hard mask, of course.
Okay, another question? No? Clamps to the speaker again, please.
We thank Mr. Christoph Busch, and thank you for sharing with us your investigation. And following our Congress, we want to invite our last but not least speaker. He's Mr. Ricardo Navarro, CEO from Chile, who will expose presenting a new generation of face recognition topic. Please.
Sí, pero estando aquí no habría problema. Veamos si no signo, imposible identificar el a veces no lo reconoce por la, me ha pasado por la frecuencia, cosas así, ¿va? Puede ser eso. Gracias. Ahí estamos. Pero si lo pongo de aquí, ¿no? Sí, se lo también. Ah, perfecto. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. So thanks for the invitation. It's an honor for me to be here talking to all of you. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the history of our company, Talk. We've been around for 8 years. We're starting on 9th year. And what we do is ID verification. We do ID verification for different purposes. We give our services to banks, to retail companies, insurance companies, and well, everyone now needs to positively identify the customers in any kind of circumstances. And what we're looking forward to do now, and with our latest developments, it's ID verification on a remote way, which is the hardest, because what Christoph was presenting with the presentations attack. I always say every day that we go to work, these guys, they get up, they take their kids to school, and then they go to do presentations attack and try to do fraud everywhere. And they are very clever, very intelligent, and they live on that. That's what they do for a living. So we at Talk started, as I said, a little bit more than 8 years ago, because here in Chile, we are really very lucky to have that ID card, which has biometrics since the year 2000. On that 2D barcode, there is the minutiae of my thumb, which was the finger used before ICAO changed it to the index fingers because of econometric use is a lot more simpler to use these fingers. These are the ones that are used now. But since we could use that, we started giving our service, and we worked with NEC's matching server, which was the best ranked by NIST by then and for many, many years. But the difference is that we didn't use their SDK to develop the software to obtain the fingerprint image and then extract the minutiae, etc., because we knew there was a big problem, which was the error of the non-match false. Sorry. When it's me and it says it's not me, okay? It was between 25 and 30%, and that was too high. If you use a system that tells your customers that they're not when they are, nobody keeps using the system because the trust ends. So we developed our own and started working with some investigation by ISO in order to acquire a good quality image, at least to know that you're going to send a good image to the matching server that will work. So we were able to lower that to somewhere between 0.5%, which is huge. If you think 25% to 0.5, it's 1,000 times better. So we did a very good job with that and started growing with more and more customers. They started trusting our service. This is a service. We don't sell software. We don't sell this. We investigate in our offices, and we keep enhancing our system. And we've been getting better and better every day. And now, as you're going to see later, we are now switching to facial recognition. Well, to be able to read that PDF 417 or that 2D barcode, we needed a special kind of hardware, which was very expensive. So, and I'm sorry, it's sort of here, but okay. So we decided to develop our own hardware to do this, and it was not really hardware that we developed, but because we changed from this 2D barcode reader from Honeywell to a normal webcam. But we have to develop all of the software in order to be able to read in any kind of lighting conditions and circumstances that would be good enough. And it took us about 2 years, but we made it. And this equipment cost us $230 each, and that one cost about $40, maybe more, maybe less. So it was very important for us, because every time we closed a deal with the company, for example, we had to install 1,000 ID verification points. Okay, so we had to invest a lot of thousands of US dollars before we even started with the service, and then we had to, invoice and then get the money back at least 2, 3, 4 months. So that was a big step forward for us, one of our first investigations. And then in 2013, the same year that iPhone introduced the Touch ID, Chile introduced a new ID card, which was a lot safer, because this one has a contactless chip. So, and it complies with the ICAO standards. So it also has a photograph of your face, especially taken in order to do facial recognition. And it has a processor, so it can do what's called match on card. So now I don't extract the minutiae from the fingerprint out and then match it. It's the card that does the match. I just have to obtain the minutiae of a live fingerprint and then give it to this processor in a contactless way. And we also were very careful all the time to avoid this presentations attack that can be done with a fake finger, PVC, or print different kinds of technologies. So we work with a fingerprint scanner that only works with a live finger. So it's got a characteristic that's called auto on, that it only turns on when live fingerprint is put it on, and it automatically extracts or gets the image. So that it's very safe. We haven't have fraud until now with our system. So as you say, the Chaos Computer Club, they were able to hack the Touch ID, but it wasn't done in a real world case. It was done with their own iPhone, with their own fingerprint, etc. Today, I don't think any one of us doesn't realize that they've lost their smartphone after maybe 10 minutes, probably less. After 2 minutes, where's my iPhone? Where's my phone? So if somebody gets your phone and even a latent fingerprint, it'll obviously take a lot more time to do that process before you realize that you don't have it and you lock it. So I don't see that as a big problem now. But it's very important anyway to have devices that can work only with live persons, which is our goal to do now with liveness detection using fingerprint. For this also we used the ISO standards, because it's an open protocol to communicate with the document. But we were very lucky since we were by then like a 3-year-old company, but we already became the leaders in Chile by what we were doing. So the civil registry, which is the government not company but unit that enrolls every Chilean since you're born until you're dead, we had the opportunity to place this QR code on the document, because on the previous it was very easy. You just had to read that PDF and you had all the information, the name and the expiry date, birth date, and the minutiae of the fingerprint. So it was very easy to obtain that and do a match. But with this one, since they decided to use a contactless chip, you first need to give it a password if you want to talk with it or work with it, for obvious reasons. If it's contactless, otherwise, with a big antenna, I could get the information of everyone's document here. So to be sure that I have in my possession that document, you have to give it this 20-digit password, which is standard. It's serial number plus expiry date plus birth date. But if our system that works so fast, like beep, you read it and then you place the fingerprint, it was a matter of seconds, and now you have to type 20 digits with, of course, doing mistakes and going back, etc. It was going to be a real problem for us. So talking with the manager of this new identity card, I suggested that we should put that QR code, which has this passcode. So if I have it, I can read it, and then work on the same way before. Fortunately, it's there. They like the idea, and it was incorporated in our document. So we could keep on working smoothly and fast as we were before. Okay, the next problem then was with this change, the people that worked at the civil registry, they went on strike exactly at the point that the provider was changing from NEC with the old card and IDEMIA or Morpho by then. The new ones, they didn't like the terms of the contract, $400 million for I don't know how many years, etc. So they went on strike, and they weren't working for at least a month. And I think that what they did is they took out all of the manufacturing devices for the old one, and some band took it because they started building fake IDs, but perfect. They had all of the security measures embedded on it, everything. The UV lights and the different things that you can touch, absolutely everything. So, well, that was a very big problem for us. How are we going to detect this? How are we going to do this? We were very lucky. One of our customers detected the first one and gave it to us. So we started looking at it. We had no clue how can we do this. It was done perfectly. The material, the print, everything. So after a couple of months, maybe less, we have a very good and fast unit of engineers developing all of our systems, and we created what we call the fraud shield, which does a lot of stuff, a lot of algorithm stuff, but we were able to detect what they were doing wrong, and then we've been stopping thousands of fake transactions, or transactions that are fraud, and our competition doesn't have this, so we've grown a lot more because of this. Something that could have killed us became one of our strengths. Okay, and since in a small country like Chile there are no many ways to prove that what you do is what you claim to do, like ISO 9001, we became part of the Biometric Institute in 2013 to comply with their standards and the way of doing things, and to give more trust to our customers. And I've learned a lot going to the Biometric Congress there every year. Excellent speakers always. And in 2016, in October, I was lucky enough to attend a conference by Jonathan Phillips from the NIST, who gave at least the first conference that I was able to see talking about the facial revolution. It was the first time that somebody said that they have achieved rates over 98% of accuracy in facial recognition. Before that, using the old minutia style and all that, you couldn't get higher accuracy than 67%, maybe 70% using facial recognition systems. That's obviously not enough compared to the accuracy of fingerprint. But after I saw that conference, I approached him and said, I need you to help me. We need to build this. So we started here in Chile working with Tesseract and different artificial intelligence engines and technologies to develop our own facial ID matcher. And because we've always dreamt of being able to give our service without hardware. We always had to use a fingerprint reader and a document reader. So this changed everything. And we worked for about 2 years in order to train our facial matching engine. And now I can say that we've tested it with different data sets, and it works absolutely magnificently. We have results over 98.5% and getting even better. We've compared our own performance against Microsoft's, which is one of the best currently, and Amazon's, Cognite. The difference is that we trained it using images extracted from ID documents. All of the other engines are trained using selfies against selfies, or photographs, or in the wild, or whatever, but photographs. When we work, we trained our system with photographs that were taken from an ID document, which is lower resolution, and against a selfie. So we trained this. Since we have a lot of customers and they trust us, they started using it, and all of these thousands of images that we started to get, we trained and retrained and retrained our engine and made it very strong and very good. So now we have this new product, which is the Tox ID verification system using facial recognition. Then the next challenge was the liveness detection. How am I going to know that the photo or the selfie that I am receiving in order to process is from a live person? Well, that's been a big challenge. The first iteration was with what's called active liveness detection, what makes you do stuff like opening your mouth or looking to one side or to the other, looking up, and in a random way. But we realized that even though it's very precise and it works very well, people don't like to use it. People, I think you're all aware, nobody likes to read manuals or instructions. Nobody does. Everyone starts trying to use the system, and if you don't read it, it's very hard when you have to give instructions. So that's been our challenge, and we've been working with designers, graphic designers, to get over this. But then on last October at the Biometric Congress, I realized that there was another way to do this, and it's called the passive liveness detection. And well, we started working with a paper from a PhD from Hong Kong, and what we do is we in the camera, in your smartphone, the lower part we put different colors, and the way that the colors reflect on the skin is totally different than the way it reflects on paper or reflects on a screen. So using that kind of technology, you're looking at your smartphone and the colors go like that, and in a couple of seconds we can be totally sure that it's a live person and not a photo or a video or something like that. So, well, this we call 2019 the spoofing year. All of our engineers are working all through this year and in making the anti-spoofing systems better and better every day. So as you can see, from the end of the world, from a small country, there are companies that are doing research and using that research and the results, their systems, in the real world. Today we have more than 5 million transactions a month with no fraud. And we also have electronic signature, since it's an electronic signature is your identity on a document. and it's the way to close a deal. What's the purpose of doing an ID verification remotely if someone wants to obtain a service I want to give, or a credit card or whatever, if I can't close a deal? If I have to tell him, well, why don't you come to our branch tomorrow? Nobody wants to go to branches. Branches are closing up. People say that millennials, they rather go to the dentist than to the bank. It's that hard. That's the truth today. So that's why, well, we are a PKI standard electronic signature company. We're accredited against the Ministry of Economy and in other countries also. So we're very proud of what we do. And some of our products are, as I say, the thing is we have products for every different operating system and different kind of devices. We work on smartphones and tablets and PCs, whether it doesn't matter if they're Macs or if they're Linux or if they're Windows. And for the first time we created our first B2C product. We've always been a B2B2C company because we give our service to a bank which uses it with their customers. So that's why it's B2B2C. But now this product that we call Legal Sign, it's based on our facial recognition system, and then relies on our public key infrastructure electronic signature system. So you can upload any document and just type the emails of the other persons that need to sign this document, and they'll receive it automatically in their email, and just click in the email and they'll take it to the document. You can check the document there, and then you have to take 3 pictures, 2 of the ID document, 1 of each side, and a selfie, and then the document is instantly signed. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can sign a document, and the one that needs the document back signed will get it right away. So no more papers flowing and traveling and getting lost, etc., from different cities, branches, etc. So that's where we're now, and we've received a lot of recognitions. And when we started, we were selected as the Innovative Company of the Year by Corfo, which is it's state company that works helping new companies grow. And then we won what's called the Digital Bank a couple of times, and the Latin Edge Award in London, which is part of the Tech UK initiative, that they're looking for companies that can grow and have the potential to give services in UK. So they want to create Silicon Valleys in every city, and we were the only winners. There was just one winner, and we won from out of 250 companies in the world. We were also world finalists with the City Tech for Integrity Challenge last year, and we also won again the Digital Bank. And now in Mexico, they did the same as in UK to find companies that can work there and be innovative and give their services there, and we won that again. So we now have offices in Peru and in Colombia and opening in Mexico, and we have our office in London. So we're very proud of what we're doing, and we're very thankful to your job, because what the standards that you create and all the security measures and everything that you do, it's fundamental for our work. So I think that ends my presentation. Thanks to everyone for being here.
Now, some questions. Puede ser en español, Ricardo Chileno, si alguien tiene alguna pregunta.
Thank you for the very interesting presentation. Regarding the testing of the presentation attack / liveness detection, have you experience with makeup attacks, makeup artists that use to modify the appearance, but the skin is of course live, the face is live, but it's still an attack, an impersonation attack? Do you have practical experience with that?
No,
Is
this we haven't, no. Maybe we should, but we haven't done that yet. We're just on the programming stage of that, and but if someone that's disguised and like you say, probably he'll pass. But since you have to have a real ID card or a real passport, and you have to wear this makeup and all this, we think it's a lot harder for that. But yes, we have to work with that. I don't know how with the makeup how the reflection works and all that. That's part of this year's development.
Questions?
Yeah, you know, in the field of beauty, there's also evolution, you know, new things coming up. So there's the concept of permanent makeup. So it's not done to purposefully change the features, but it's done to enhance beauty. So how are you going to handle something like that? Thanks.
Well, when people do that kind of not temporary but definite changes, it's the responsibility is of the country's national registry system in order to re-enroll them with the changes. It's not something that we must be aware of. If you change something in your face or you paint something, then you have to get a new photo or a new passport with that, and with that we can do the comparison, which should work.
It's again a very interesting talk. I mean, often the problems are not necessarily the technical problems, or once you overcome those, there's a lot around the kind of institutional and legal frameworks.
Yes.
Especially if you're trying to introduce this kind of selfie-assisted legal sign system. Would you like to say a little bit about how you've managed to work within the Chilean
yes,
sort of legal system in order to make that acceptable?
Yes. On the old styled electronic signature, you had to go personally and then be enrolled and sign on a paper, and they'll take you a picture, and then they'll give you a token with the electronic certificate on it, and after, just before they give it to you, you have to create a PIN in order to sign with that hardware. And what we did, we changed the way of doing this by relying on when the person has to go by themselves, we rely on the time that they went to get their ID card, because they went personally and they were enrolled by the entity that is created by law to enroll the Chileans. So that's the first thing that we do. And we check for a lot of different characteristics of the document to see if it's true. We go through a web service to check that it's not blocked, because by the law you have to block it if in case you lose it. I don't know what's the timing for that, but the responsibility lies on the owner of the document. So after all that, we take pictures of the document, we run a lot of algorithms after we read the information that's there to check that the information is correct, and then we do this biometric comparison, and with that we enroll the person and create an electronic signature, an electronic certificate on an HSM, which is an appliance for this, and we obtain a hash of the document to be signed, and with that we create this one-time certificate. When we go back to the software that signs the document, we do another hash and compare it. That's the same, that the document hasn't been changed. And then we put the electronic certificate, which is a signature, and then we kill that certificate. So every signature gets a new certificate. It's the safest way that we've managed. That's the way it works today. He's got another question.
I can understand what international standard, which international standard you have used. Would you let me know how?
Which international standard for what? Excuse me.
You said that you have used a lot of international standard in your work.
Yes.
But I can't understand which international standard you have used.
Okay, well, for example, when I'm talking about electronic signature, the public key infrastructure it's the one that you have to comply with ETSI, for example, the European standard for electronic signatures, and the same with the minutiae, even facial minutiae or fingerprint minutiae. We work with ANSI 378 and with ISO, etc. And the same with when we check for the quality of a fingerprint before we send it for a match, we use ISO also to check that and don't do matches that are not going to work. So we stop that first.
Okay. The last questions. Which are the new challenges for your company now?
Well, of course, as I said, anti-spoofing, that's the hardest thing now. And now that we've met you, it's very impressive. But Patrick Rother introduced me to Juan. We were both from Chile, and we didn't know each other. And when I got to London, he said, "Yeah, I'm going to Chile, to Iquique." So he email presented us. So Juan is in very advanced investigations on iris recognition. So probably we're gonna start moving into that direction also. The periocular iris recognition. I think that mixed with the facial recognition is gonna be a hit. Very hard to forge.
Okay. Thank you, Ricardo.
No, thank you everyone for the
Please
opportunity.
clap to Seguridad.